Some folks have a strange idea of entertainment.
Hello, I'm Alex Maynard.
I'm Will Lastly.
And we are the Blood Brothers.
No relation.
And today we are taking a break from the rankings. Probably going to be taking a break from the rankings for a little bit.
Yeah.
Talk about certain other subjects. And today we will be talking about horror anthology movies, not TV series,
right.
Movies.
This is a format that I just really, really love. Two of my all-time favorite horror movies are anthology films. Creepshow is like in my top 5 favorite horror movies.
Which I just recently watched for the first time.
And then there's a movie from the 60s called Black Sabbath.
Which I also recently watched for the first time.
Yeah.
Because Will knows a whole lot about this genre. And a big reason why we had to take a lot of time, if you watch The Wrong Turn, if you watched that episode instead of the movies, I hope you did. This wasn't a...
Watch 1, 2, and the remake. That's the short version of that video. 1, 2, and the remake.
This wasn't a subgenre that I was very familiar with. So I really wanted to take my time, and luckily Will helped me out by Creepshow I've heard of, but I never had a chance to watch it, and I never heard of Black Sabbath, and I'm glad we're going to be able to talk about both of those. So I really want you to take the lead on this subject.
Absolutely, and that is the where the one of the greatest bands of all time got their name.
Going off the rails on the crazy train.
That was Ozzy's solo career.
I know, but I wanted to make the pun.
That's fair. But it's a format that I think really works. I think it allows for and because with some horror anthologies, each one is done by a different director, like the VHS series, or XX, which we've both seen. And there's one of the probably first examples of a horror anthology film is a film from the 40s called Dead of Night, and that one, each one is a different director. As well as there's a movie called 3 Extremes. It's an Asian horror film. I haven't seen it, but
I don't think I've heard of that one. Around what time did that come out?
I do not remember. I just know of it. But I love the way it's almost like binging a horror TV show in one evening.
Okay.
Where it's like you've just got all these like quick sort of mini horror films strung together. Most of the time there's a framing device of sorts whether it's a host presenting them or if they're all sort of taking place within this, sort of overarching story.
Or an overlapping theme that's presented in each tale or story. And what I like about this versus an anthology TV series, TV series, sure, every season may be different or each episode may be different, but it's still in 1 hour of one story, whereas in a movie, it's typically 3 or 4 stories broken down in 90 to 200 minutes.
Not 200.
90
to 120.
90 to 120. I'm sorry, that's what I meant.
I knew what you meant.
200, that'd be a long movie. But 90 to 120 to tell 3 or 4 stories.
Yeah.
And I think that's very, very challenging.
Yeah.
And some of these movies I've seen to prepare for this really pulled it off.
Yeah.
In fantastic ways.
Yeah, I didn't show you any bad ones, but I don't know if I've seen very many like bad ones of this.
I heard of one that was really bad.
Oh no, I have seen one that's I've seen one that's abysmal, one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life.
What's it called?
Veronica.
Oh, yes.
And then we'll talk about that one a little bit. And then the third VHS movie, VHS Viral, is really bad.
There was this horror movie, while I was preparing for this, I didn't watch it, but it was kind of a take on Creepshow and Tales from the Crypt. It was, I think it was called American Nightmares had some kind of subtitle on it, and it was like Danny Trejo, and it was it was horror anthology. But I looked up. All I did was give a quick look up of the reviews, and it was so bad I didn't want to spoil all the good horror anthologies with one that was going to be really bad, so I didn't bother.
I actually do remember one other one that was really, really fucking bad, and it was because somehow this like micro budget just crap fest somehow got to call itself Creepshow 3. It had no connection to Stephen King or George Romero or Tom Savini or anyone involved. And it is god-awful.
Oh, boy.
But
I could see the offense just light up in your face as soon as you said it.
Yeah. But, and of course, I adore TV shows like The Twilight Zone and Tales from the Crypt, and Black Mirror. And Twilight Zone and Tales from the Crypt will come up later in a moment because because the subject matter for those ended up being part of 2 different horror anthology films, but are actually 3. But like I said, Dead of Night was sort of one of the ones that was one of the horror anthologies. It might have been the first horror anthology film to really kick it off, and it was this group of people all talking about nightmares they had. And that was sort of the framing device. But then in the, and then again, Black Sabbath came along and just, and that's one that I did show you. So you, why don't you go ahead and just, what are some of your thoughts on it? Because I could just talk at lengths about it, but I want to know sort of from someone who...
Well, I remember we actually watched that together.
Yeah.
For the first time I got to see it, and just...
Because I really wanted to see how you reacted to it, because it's an Italian horror film, and directed by a guy named Mario Bava, who is one of the greatest horror directors of all time, and a lot of Italian horror, especially his and Dario Argento's, and directors like that, Lucio Fulci's, they tend to do a lot with color when they're establishing atmosphere.
Now, what year was Black Sabbath when it came out?
That was 63? Yes.
1963.
Mm-hmm.
And usually for me, horror that dates back that old typically won't have a big effect on me. I can look at it and see that it's a good movie.
And enjoy it and appreciate it.
Appreciate it and what it's done for the genre. But I usually won't feel any sort of chill.
Just genuine terror.
Yeah, I won't feel legit scares.
Yeah.
And this is the first movie that got to me in a long time. And it came out in 1963. Take a note, filmmakers, you don't need crappy CGI every 5 seconds and terrible jump scares every 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with jump scares.
Jump scares can be used very well, but I've always said jump scares are the fart joke of horror. If you use them cleverly enough and you build up to it, you actually do a proper build and payoff, it can work really well. But if it's just nothing but jump, 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 or just, fart, 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 eventually it's like, this isn't funny anymore, or this isn't scary anymore, it's just annoying.
And Black Sabbath...
It had a few.
It had a few, but it knew when to use
exactly,
it.
because the atmosphere was so damn good.
And kind of like you were talking about the lighting and the coloring, it made it so, especially in the first story, it was so eerie and just so daunting.
Yeah.
You knew something bad was going to happen. The moment I will never get that face out of my head of the dead corpse.
Yeah.
The face.
It was just this it was...
That will stick with me forever.
That first segment, The Drop of Water is what it's called. That segment was really about that was really all about building the suspense. And then the second segment, which was called The Telephone, was more of a whodunit, or more of a like, trying to sort of put together what exactly is going on.
Is it real or is it not real?
Right, and then the third one called the Verdelak is like a lush period horror monster thing about a version of vampires from this particular culture.
Boris Karloff very much elevates. I don't know if it would be, if that segment would be remembered as well or as fondly if it wasn't for the performance.
Because Karloff hosts the film.
And in between segments,
that's what I mean.
He's hinting that he's, some kind of monster, and that's
or that he is, or that he like gets to be one, like, or it's like he's sort of don't worry, I am in the movie later. Just almost like he's
in on the joke.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the man was a legend for a reason. I mean, guys like Boris Karloff or Vincent Price or Christopher Lee or Peter Cushing, like these guys, they were horror legends for a damn good reason.
Agreed. And honestly, I think it took Black Sabbath and to see Boris Karloff,
because he was older at this point. Like keep in mind, he was Frankenstein Frankenstein's monster in 1931.
And see, for me, whenever I think Boris Karloff, that's what I think is Frankenstein's monster. So seeing him in something else, because I really don't know a whole lot of Karloff's work outside of Frankenstein.
Right.
But I always knew he had meaning to the genre.
Yeah.
So seeing him...
And of course, I think all of us grew up with him narrating How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
True that as well.
The original cartoon, I mean.
So to see him just ham it up.
Oh, yeah.
And just...
Because when he's
crazy.
When he's doing the host segments, he's being, kind of goofy and just kind of, almost like he's taunting the audience. He's telling them spooky stories.
And then when it gets to his segment, it's just...
You're just like... The gifted dramatic actor comes out, and you realize just how fucking good of an actor he is.
One of my favorite lines in the movie comes from him is when he gets back home and he just...
Yeah.
I'm hungry.
Yeah, just...
Damn!
Yeah.
He nailed that line.
Yeah. And of course, he had very large eyes that you can do a lot with that, both as an actor and then as a director, because the lighting and camera angle, like, they were able to really fully utilize his eyes in that film, just the way it was lit. And I've said, one of my favorite just images in the history of horror is this image of when he is riding on a horse through the woods at night, and everything is like this, dark blue, and his face is lit, and his eyes are just like straight up demonic.
As we were watching it, I believe you were saying it was just you can see the demon that is possessing him.
Yeah. Because his character in this segment is I can't remember what region, but a Verdelak is sort of this particular European region's version of a vampire. And it's like with some slightly different caveats, like they can only feast on those they love, or they can only like regain strength by feasting on those they love. It's I forget, it's some Eastern European culture, but he is this creature. And when I was in college, I was doing a little presentation on how lighting can really affect a mood, and I decided to do all horror movies. And that was an image I used as an example, was where just the light being on his face, just how terrifying that was, and how unnerving it was.
And usually when you think horror, you think darkness.
Exactly.
And the fact that they were able to use light
and color
and make it terrifying. And I don't think anyone at that time could have pulled that off better than Karloff.
Oh no. Again, like people like Boris Karloff, Vincent Price, Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, John Carradine, Bela Lugosi, like these guys, they could give you a look or say a word or something, and instantly they commanded. So I always use this example. There's a movie called House of the Long Shadows that I highly recommend. It's a little bit lesser known, but it's this British horror comedy. It's got a lot of British people in it. It takes place in England, but it's also got some American actors in it. But it's Vincent Price, Peter Cushing, Sir Christopher Lee, and John Carradine all in one movie together.
Oh, wow.
And as well as Desi Arnaz Jr., as in Desi and Lucy's son. But Vincent Price's character, when he first enters, he enters through the doors from the rain. He looks up, he's got like a hat on, he just looks up and he just says, "I've returned." And with 2 words, he commands the entire realm. Like, he is entirely in control with those 2 words, and Karloff possessed that gift as well, where he could shift from being, fun and campy to being truly haunting.
And he really did elevate the third segment, because the third segment I kind of had the biggest issues with.
Okay.
And
just because of the somewhat dated,
this very dated love at first sight bullshit.
It's very fairy tale.
Very fairy tale, but it felt so forced.
It did.
Like, you put that in modern times, that guy comes off as an absolute dick.
Oh, absolutely. And it was loosely based on a short story, so I don't know if that was in it. But it definitely is an old-fashioned fairy tale trope.
Yeah, so a friend of someone in that family goes to visit, and he immediately falls in love with the cute blonde.
Yeah.
And he's just hardcore going after her, and she does not seem interested.
But he's the knight in shining armor.
And I remember he says this line to her that... and it's the 60s, so it's supposed to be romantic. But for me, it's just, you're such a manipulative piece of shit.
You got to think back to, again, like, fairy tales, but also, like, what early James Bond movies were like. Like, it's definitely a product of its time.
He's telling her that she should go with him and get out of this hellhole, because if you don't, it's going to ruin your life. Doesn't sound bad. And then he adds this, it's going to ruin your life. And mine.
Yeah. Way to make it about you.
I can't wait for this guy to get it. And he does.
He does.
She is a vampire at the end of it, and she hypnotizes him and feeds off of him. And if anything, he doesn't deserve to live forever. Dirtbag, but whatever. But if it wasn't for Karloff, that would have been the weakest one for me. I feel that the movie almost had it backwards, where it was the drip of water was so up here, and then we went here, and
and that was
Karloff brought it back here,
and that was the American release did that.
I remember you telling me that.
And the only reason I showed you that one is because the English audio of the original, like, Italian cut doesn't seem to exist. It only seems to exist with the Italian dub. Because what they would do with a lot of Italian movies at the time is have the Italian actors speak the English lines phonetically. Like, they didn't know what they were saying, but they just sort of, pronounced them based on what they're, again, just listening to what they are supposed to say. And then they would have actual English-speaking actors dub them so that their mouths matched the dub, but it also sounded like they knew what they were saying. And it looks like the Italian dub of the European cut is the only one that seems to exist, but in that one it went the telephone, the vertilock, the drop of water, which really is kind of that really is, I think, in order, sort of in ascending order of greatness.
And with the second story, the telephone, it's
it's great, but it's noticeably not as good as The Drop of Water.
yes, but it's it's almost like this very strange sexual tension horror because we have obviously a very beautiful woman in a very vulnerable situation. She's getting ready for bed. She gets a phone call, and obviously someone's watching her.
From an ex she thought was dead.
Right? And he can see everything she's doing.
Yeah.
And he's telling her, I don't want you to put anything on. You take everything off, and it's so creepy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can see where people get, when a stranger calls, and Black Christmas would draw inspiration from this, quite frankly.
Yeah.
It's done very well, and the whole thing of, is it actually a dead person?
Yeah. Is
calling?
this a ghost or
And with the end of her stabbing him, and then all of a sudden the body being gone and the phone ringing.
Yeah.
It's, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
It was really good. I liked it.
Yeah.
But that first one is
just knocks it out of the park.
And I remember when we first started it.
Yeah.
I didn't feel too impressed.
Yeah.
Because I remember going, oh man, I can tell it's dubbed.
Yeah.
And I remember you just said, just wait. Wait.
You get used to it.
You get used to it. And it's one of those things you just quickly forget about because they
Yeah.
set the stage.
Yeah.
So good.
And you settle into it.
So for me, even though I can get used to it, it's still it's always going to be there for me.
Sure.
Oh, okay. But Drip of Water, I'm almost glad it is first.
Yeah.
Because it
sucks you in.
sucks me right in. And, you got the worried caregiver, the horrible nurse, quite frankly, who doesn't really seem to care about her job or her patient.
Yeah.
And, she's warned. They're always warned. Don't take anything or don't disrupt anything in the room. And she steals the ring off the dead person's finger.
It kind of becomes the telltale heart in a way where instead of like hearing the heart beating, it's this drip, drip, drip from earlier when she knocked over a glass of water at the, dead woman's bedside. And so she's hearing the sound of that water dropping. She's hearing that sound everywhere.
And that's
sort of the harbinger.
Yeah, that's she coming. And she comes all right. And, it's just, the whole time it was building up to it, I kept expecting it. And they just wouldn't give it to me. And it's just, man, I remember I was getting chills watching it. And they did, again, the lighting, the just random red. It just brought in such a sense of terror.
The mood that the color creates is
because at first it was green.
Yeah.
And it was just almost like setting a sorrowful scene.
Yeah.
And then it went red, as in, okay, the demon is coming. And, of course, the ghost of the lady tracks her down, and she's raising her hands, and the nurse is raising her hands, and it looks like she's choking herself to death.
Yeah.
And cops show up after the witness called, and there's no signs of a struggle. She wasn't strangled. I believe they said in the movie
she died of fright.
She died of fright. It was almost as though she saw something no one was meant to see. And man, I'm getting chills just saying the line. And they said, well, it looks like there may have been one sign of a struggle. It looks like someone took a ring off her finger. And they zoom in on the witness's face, who starts to panic.
Yeah.
Because she took the damn ring. And when you first see the nurse's face, it just looks like a dead corpse.
Yeah.
And after you find out that the witness took the ring, and they zoom, I'm getting chills, man. It's so good.
It starts to have that same sort of demonic look that the previous body.
It's almost looking right at her. Yeah. Damn, it's so good.
It's so good. I love this movie.
If you haven't seen that segment, at least Go find it. It is worth
Mario
it.
Bava's Black Sabbath is a masterpiece. I mean, it's like, even warts and all, even the parts that are like, that didn't age well, like, warts and all, if you just watch this movie as it is truly just brilliant.
I agree. Black Sabbath overall can be almost like, for people who want to make horror, they can see this and realize they don't have to overcomplicate it.
No.
It can be simple and still be very damn scary. Because I think that's where a lot of modern horror gets it wrong.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm glad you really showed me this movie.
Yeah.
Because I really didn't think, a movie from 63. And I like older horror stuff.
Oh, sure.
But usually 70s. I usually don't give 60s stuff a fair shot.
Sure.
But Black Sabbath, son of a bitch, that was good.
Well, then later on in like all throughout the 70s, there was a and I think starting in the early 60s, there was this British studio called Amicus, and they were kind of a competitor of Hammer, which was another British horror studio that.
Before you go on, and when I say I usually don't give stuff from the 60s a shot, there's obviously a couple gems like Peeping Tom and Psycho.
Right.
Anyway.
And this studio, their thing, Amicus's, bread and butter was making these horror anthology films. And they did some non-anthology stuff, but that was mostly what they did. And a lot of their movies, they got Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, Donald Pleasance, Denholm Elliott, Michael Gough. Like, they got some very notable, well-respected British character actors in there. John Pertwee, who was one of the doctors on Doctor Who, was in one. Joan Collins was in one. It was Terry Thomas, who was this English comic actor, was in one. He was the voice of Sir Hiss in Disney's Robin Hood. Glynis Johns, who was the mom in Mary Poppins, was in it. Was in one of them. But what they would do is they would do these movies, and they're great. The best one, I think, is one called The House That Dripped Blood.
Okay.
But there's also one that's there's one that's called Asylum. And each of these, there is a wraparound. And for Asylum, it's this new doctor goes in to interview to work at the asylum, and his test is to figure out which of these three patients used to be the doctor here. And he meets like three different mental patients, and they basically say why they're not crazy. They say, here's what happened, and that's the segment, and his task is to figure out which one of them used to be the head doctor here.
Okay.
There's one called Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, which, what a great fucking title. I mean, campy as hell, but in that one, Peter Cushing is this tarot card reader, and it's this group of people on a train. And he's like just sort of doing all their tarot readings and sort of telling them, their future and, the horrible shit that's going to happen to them. And all of these like have a twist with the wraparound has a twist ending. Two of them though were based on EC horror comics, which that's the EC Comics put out among other things Tales from the Crypt, Mad Magazine early on, Weird Science, all these Two-Fisted Tales, like all these pulp comics, and they made a movie called Tales from the Crypt that was 5 stories based on different horror stories from EC's various library of horror comics. Tales from the Crypt, The Haunt of Fear, The Vault of Horror, and Shock suspense stories. And then they made a sequel called The Vault of Horror that was also all these segments based on those. And these predated the TV series. But these also didn't have that same sort of goofier, campier tone that the TV series would have, and then Creepshow would come to have. But with Tales from the Crypt, again, each one was an adaptation of a different story from an EC horror comic, and it was all these people, find themselves in a crypt, and then the crypt keeper, who isn't this cackling, punning it. It's this, basically, he kind of looks like a monk, and he's played by English actor Sir Ralph Richardson, who, for anyone who's seen the movie Time Bandits, he plays God in that movie. Time Bandits, everyone please watch this movie. It's an absolute fucking classic. But he just sort of said, he knows all the things they're about to go do, and all of them are basically on their way to do something terrible, and he tells them what they're about to do, and the twist at the end is they've already done it, they're in hell.
Oh.
Again, classic, that type of twist. But the Amicus horror anthology films are great. One of them is called Torture Garden, which, what a great fucking title. And in that one, Burgess Meredith, who was the Penguin in the 60s Batman show, but also was in several Twilight Zone episodes, is the host. He's called like Dr. Diablo or something like that, but it's this carnival attraction.
What a great name that is.
Exactly. It's this carnival attraction and called the Torture Garden. And it's basically these sort of, animatronic, like, antique torture devices. It's like a freak show. It's like, ooh, come witness the, and you've got all these people that go in, and he says, for those of you who want an extra, who want to be truly terrified, stay for more. And he basically has them look at this. There's this woman who's basically like a fate from, Greek mythology, and she's got a string that she's about to cut, and he says, like, stare intently at the string, and it'll, give you a warning about, the consequences of the evil you may intend to do at some point in your life. And one of the guys is Jack Palance.
I do like Jack Palance.
I do too. Talk about a guy who was a great actor that ended up in a lot of horse shit. I mean, then again, so did most of these, like, horror legends that we're talking about. But
ironically, the very first memory I have of Jack Palance is from the movie Young Guns.
Nice.
And that and the '89 Batman.
Yeah. It's City Slickers where he won an Oscar. But of course, the guy's name is Dr. Diablo, so we know what the twist is going to be at the end. He's the devil. And, but yeah, seek these movies out. I think a lot of them are actually free on YouTube. I don't know if they're free on YouTube legally, but hunt them down if you can, because they're really good.
I feel as though with horror anthology, it almost has this rich history of you have to be really bad to screw this up. Mm-hmm. Because really all you need is at least...
Especially if they're all based on other media.
True. And I feel like with horror anthology-based movies, you need at least just one really good one that can carry the rest of it.
You need an anchor segment.
I feel that way with XX.
Yeah.
Their opening one, The Box.
Yeah.
One of the... a few times I've ever seen horror with no blood, and it's just horrifying.
It's disturbing.
Mom and her two kids are on a train, and the boy is bugging this guy about, hey, what's in the box? And he just goes, oh, it's a present. Do you want to see? And he shows them what's inside. We never see what's inside the box, but the boy's expression just changes, and then he just stops fucking eating. And it sounds so hokey of make food scary, because I feel that was the challenge going into this.
Sure.
But it was just...
The movie Swallow does a really good job of doing that as well.
I'm so immature.
I am too. As soon as I said it, I'm like, Alex, you fucking child. I swear. As if I wouldn't be doing the exact same thing if you were the one telling me.
But he just stops eating. And his sister, his mom, his dad, they're all worried about him. And then the sister, he tells the sister something, and the sister stops eating.
Yeah.
And then he tells the dad, and the dad stops eating. And the mom has a nightmare to where they're eating her, and she's okay with it because they're finally eating again. And eventually, those three die of starvation. And I think it's around Christmas time.
Yeah.
And the mom is about to hand over a present, and that's when it finally clicks of... All this started when he looked inside that box, and she's, what was in the box?
Yeah.
It was nothing. Like, that's all we got.
Yeah.
And the mom, presumably from what we get, is spending the rest of her life on the subway trying to find this guy to find out what he did. And there's so many theories about this character and so many theories about what was in the box.
Yeah.
And
it's the briefcase from Pulp Fiction. It's like we will never know.
And if you did know, it would kind of be a buzzkill no matter what it was.
Yeah.
But XX I thought was pretty good.
Yeah.
They also had a horror comedy with the birthday.
That was the funniest one. That was my favorite one just because it cracked me up.
And it cracked me up as well because I thought for sure that dad was murdered.
Yeah.
The mom finds her... It's their daughter's birthday.
Yeah.
And she finds her husband in his office. Surprisingly, he's home. Like, they thought he wouldn't make it. But he's home. He dead. And he overdosed on pills. But the mom doesn't want this to ruin her birthday.
Who is played by character actress Melanie Linsky, who is the star of the movie Heavenly Creatures, which is fantastic. And she's also has a supporting role in another one of my all-time favorite horror movies, The Frighteners. Both are Peter Jackson films. But yeah, Melanie Linsky, she's fantastic.
But she's just... This can wait.
Yeah.
Like, my daughter's birthday...
She has to have the perfect birthday party.
It has to be perfect, so I'm going to hide this body. And she goes to hide it in the closet, and the maid comes in, and the maid looks all menacing as hell.
Yeah.
And you think maybe the maid did something the entire time.
You're trying to figure out if there was foul play.
If there's foul play. And it's just... The tension is just there.
Yeah.
And... The mom is just so frantic, and she never seems to get dressed out of her nightgown and robe. And she eventually stuffs him into this panda costume that accidentally gets wheeled out at the end for the finale of the birthday. And they take the head off the panda, and it's the dead dad, and the mom is just, nope! And... You kind of just see her being like, well, shit.
Yeah, just kind of you just see her just give up.
And the best part...
The title. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it's I
believe it goes from the birthday.
Because it opens the title The Birthday,
yes,
right?
And then it cuts to...
And then at the very end, when it does the title again, it's The Birthday.
The birthday that Lucy forgot.
Yeah.
Or the reason why she has the memory that she repressed that really wasn't her mom's fault. Okay, but she'll still have personal intimate issues according to her therapist. I thought it was hilarious.
It was so funny. And this is the one I think the singer St. Vincent directed this one.
I believe so.
XX was one, and it was called XX because women directed and sort of...
oh, that's right. This was...
all the segments were directed by women, and they all starred women.
That's right.
And a lot of them had to do with, like, women's issues, like being a mother like a lot of them had to do with being a mother and like trying to deal with getting your kids to eat or stuff like just all these sort of fears that women have.
And I'm kicking myself right now because I can't seem to remember the. Oh, okay. I remember the third tale.
I haven't seen it in a while. But...
The third tale was it almost felt like the opening to a supernatural horror.
What was it?
Like a group of friends go into the desert and this demon kills and wears the skin of one of the friends and just one by one kills all the others.
Oh, that's right.
It was really good and the monster looked badass.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly can't remember the fourth one very well, but I remember watching that one and I wasn't too impressed. I believe it was the mom's son was the son of the devil, and the son had to choose between taking his destiny or choosing the love of his mother. But I thought that was the weakest. And for me, that seems to be the thing about a lot of these anthology films is that they'll have one or two that are really good, and then maybe one or two that aren't as good.
Yeah.
But with XX, I know with Black Sabbath, all three were really good.
Yeah.
Twilight Zone, they're all good.
Yeah. And I'll talk about Twilight Zone the movie in a moment.
And with XX, I really thought
the
first two were so great.
Yeah.
The third one was okay, and then the fourth one was honestly forgettable for me.
Yeah. But it's like, watch it for those first two.
Yes, it's on Hulu.
Yeah.
If you have Hulu, check out XX.
Yeah. But like I said earlier, I'm a huge fan of the Twilight Zone, the TV show. In fact, Rod Serling was the first impression I ever taught myself. Before I was even very good at it. But in the 80s, they made the Twilight Zone the movie. And 4 directors, John Landis, Steven Spielberg, Joe Dante, and George Miller, collaborated. And 3 of the 4 segments were essentially remakes or reimaginings of existing Twilight Zone episodes. The first segment that John Landis did took elements from certain episodes, but was mostly its own thing. And there was a lot of controversy around the movie because during the filming of the first segment, there was a terrible accident and 3 people died, 2 of which were children. Vic Morrow, who was the star of it, and then 2 child actors in it, both died because there was a helicopter scene and the helicopter crashed and decapitated 2 of them, and I think crushed the other one. But so there's a lot of controversy around the movie, the fact that they finished the movie, they kept going, and I'm thinking myself as an actor, I would want the movie to be finished, but I also understand why a lot of people felt like it was in poor taste to keep going. But that being besides the point, I really like this one because it demonstrates the different types of Twilight Zone episodes there were. Because the first one, you've got a little prologue with Dan Aykroyd and Albert Brooks, where it's these 2 guys basically geeking out over the Twilight Zone, and then Twilight Zone twist.
Do you want to see something
really scary? Yeah, it's like, but then
I hadn't seen the movie before, but I always remember that scene.
Yeah,
because it's just it would pop up in other horror movies as a clip.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I watched it when I was watching the movie for the first time and I saw that clip, I was thinking, okay, that I have seen before.
Yeah. But the first segment that John Landis did is more about the social commentary. And it's very chilling social commentary because basically you've got this bigot who doesn't get a promotion, and the guy who did get the promotion is Jewish. And so he starts, going off about Jews, then about Arabs, then about blacks, then about Asians. Like, he goes off on this horrible racist rant to his friends in this bar, and he storms out of the bar, and all of a sudden, he is in 1940s Nazi-occupied France.
Yep.
And the Nazis think he's a Jew. So, then... he's being chased by Nazis, and then he falls off a ledge, and then he gets up, and then he like lands on his stomach. When he rolls over, he's surrounded by Klansmen who think he's black.
And that's when it dawned on me that that's what was actually happening. Because at first I was thinking he's just being chased by those who he almost admired.
Yeah.
For going after people he hated so much.
Yeah.
And now he just has to know what it's like to be hunted just like they were.
Right.
But when he was being lynched and they were, you know, thinking he's black, that's when it dawned on me, oh, he is what he hates.
Yeah.
And now he has to know how it feels.
Yeah, and so he gets chased into the brush by these guys, and all of a sudden he's in Vietnam. And as he mentions having been in, I guess, Korea, would have been given the time and his age and stuff. And he's in Vietnam, which
he thinks he's finally safe because he starts getting up. I'm American.
Yeah, he sees a group of American soldiers, and he's like, "Oh, American soldiers, they'll help me." Open fire.
And then he's back in Nazi Germany.
He ducks out of the way of the open fire, and then all of a sudden, back in Nazi Germany, they catch him, slap a gold star on him, and load him into a train car. And he looks around and sees all these, like, distraught, just poor Jewish people who were running. He looks out the window of the train car, and he sees the bar where he was before. Like, he looks out the window, and it's present day again, and his friends are like, where'd he go? And he's calling after them.
That was truly a horrifying moment. Because, yes, he is kind of getting what he deserves for the things that he said, but it's also, did he really mean those things, or was he just mad and just was venting in the most vile of ways?
Yeah.
Because there's almost a sliver part of me that does feel bad for him as he's calling out to his friends who can't hear him.
Yeah.
And that train just
keeps on going.
Keeps going. His hands barely sticking
end
out.
End of segment, yeah.
End segment. It was truly terrifying.
And it's almost like it's saying, either way, hate is hate.
That's right.
No matter how outward you are about it. Because, if you're saying these things you wouldn't normally say, but you do still think these things. Like,
I wish we could drop some people off today in the Twilight Zone for that segment.
Yeah.
I'll just leave that there.
Mm-hmm. We wouldn't want to cause a huge controversy. But the second segment, Spielberg's segment, this definitely feels like a Spielberg type story, because this is more the kind of almost modern day fairy tale.
This was my least favorite.
It is the weakest one, because it's the only one that's really not horror.
Yeah. And I know not all Twilight Zone was horror.
Yeah.
But for me, being a horror guy,
right,
that's what I want.
It was a good palate cleanser given how bleak the first one was.
True, like it's definitely the film is very well structured. Mm-hmm. But for me, I want horror all day because I'm a very sick man.
Right.
But
as am I. You're in bad company.
But this entire story, I was just expecting something.
You were waiting for something
happen.
creepy to happen?
Yes, because he seems so strange and so creepy.
Yeah, the main character is played by Scatman Crothers, who, of course, Dick Halloran from The Shining, but also was the voice of Scat Cat in the Aristocats. I mean, just one of those just beloved actors. And he plays this sweet old man that goes to this new retirement home. And he basically encourages them to try to relive that spark of joy they had when they were kids, instead of just kind of sitting around just being, just kind of slowly, aging and withering away. And so they sneak out at night to play kick the can. And all of a sudden, they're children again. And
I totally thought that it was just going to keep... They were just going to keep getting younger and younger until they were unborn.
Yeah.
I totally thought that was going to be the twist.
Yeah. And so basically
I'm a sick man.
This is where, again, you had some Twilight Zone stuff where it was still supernatural, but was actually kind of heartwarming in the end. And this is one of those where they basically had this realization of, wait, I don't want to have to live my entire life all over again. Like, now I'll never meet my husband. Now I'll have to do this. And so he says, well, why can't you just keep this mindset your whole life? And so basically he returns them to, their old age, and they now have a new lust for life. And they now are like, we don't have to,
I think some of them even choose to stay children.
One does.
One does.
One's like, no, I really would rather do all this over again. And he lets him. It ends with him, with the main guy
going to another place,
leaving, and he enters a new retirement home. Like, oh, you must be so-and-so, our new arrival, as if he just goes from place to place, sort of trying to, do this, which is very sweet.
Like rekindle the human spirit.
Yeah, exactly.
And those who may have lost it.
Right.
It is, and like you said, it is the perfect palate cleanser for Nazi KKK going on in part one.
Yeah, and then we dive headlong back into just weird with Joe Dante's segment, and segments 3 and 4 are based on very, very, very well-known and beloved Twilight Zone episodes. This one being It's a Good Life, which involves a little boy who has just like unlimited power and can just sort of do whatever he wants just with the power of his mind.
He teleports a girl into a television and she gets killed by a cartoon.
Yeah. And because it's Joe Dante, you do get a Dick Miller cameo. And you do get Kevin McCarthy in it. And it's a great cavalcade of practical effects. And he does do a cool flip of the script, or not flip of the script, but sort of his own spin on the original episode. Because in the original episode, it was an entire town.
Okay.
Or an entire small town. And he would basically wish people into the cornfield. And it was just this like giant, vast, endless cornfield where they'd kind of just be lost forever. It was almost like being in the middle of the ocean.
Okay.
But in this case, it's just...
They were the original children of the corn.
Right. In this case, it's just this kid in this one house where all these people who've just sort of over the years come to the house. Like, his parents are nowhere to be seen. He has a sister, a biological sister, who is upstairs just sort of in her room in a rocking chair, and she has no mouth. But all these people that are sort of his family, you realize, are people who just come to the house. Like, one of them is clearly is in a Girl Scout uniform. One of them is clearly was a traveling salesman. I think the dad was probably supposed to be a Jehovah's Witness. Just based on the way he's dressed. All these people who've clearly just come to the door, and he's kind of just made part of his family. And so he's created this nuclear family that just loves him and dotes on him, and because they know he can do literally anything.
And you can tell the longer this goes on, because at first it does just seem like a creepy family. Maybe the boy's the only one who's normal. That's the initial vibe. And then the longer it goes on, it's more of they're all afraid of him.
They're terrified of him because they know he has just this unlimited, spectacular power.
And just they're doting on him because they don't want anything bad to happen to themselves.
Yeah, and he loves cartoons. Is his thing? Is he loves cartoons, and we find out later. Oh, so his real parents, he basically wished them into the TV, and they were killed somehow on TV, probably in a cartoon. His sister, he like basically took her mouth away, and so she's just kind of just confined to this rocking chair in her room, just traumatized with no mouth. And this also takes a little bit of inspiration from a different Twilight Zone episode about this teacher who is able to sort of reach this traumatized kid. And so they kind of have that character, gives him a ride home, gives this kid a ride home. And what's funny is the guy in the diner where she meets this kid, the guy with the red hair who says the kid's screwing up the TV, he played the kid in the original segment.
Nice.
That's
I did not know that.
actor Bill Mooney, who was Will Robinson in Lost in Space. He has a cameo in it, complaining about this kid. But yeah, he was the original Anthony, and so it's really, really, really cool how she's sort of the one who's finally able to reach him.
Well, in a very dark way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it seems the whole time she is trying to get out of there.
Yeah.
And then at the end, it's almost as if she's about to use this boy for her own personal gain.
Oh, see, I never got that vibe from it.
That's kind of what I got.
I got more, it was like she realized she had to talk to him as a teacher. She realized he is still a little boy.
I don't know. For me, it was more of, because I guess it was just the way she mentioned of, I can help you use these powers.
Yeah.
And I can help you control them. I can help you get them stronger. And for me, it was just, does she have like some kind of dark intentions in mind?
I never got that from it, but yeah, who knows? And then the final one, which is probably the strongest one, is a remake of the classic Nightmare at 30,000 or Nightmare at 20,000 feet.
It's me. I'm the man on the wing.
I'm the man on the wing. Which the original episode featured William Shatner in the lead role, and it's this paranoid man who's terrified of flying, and he looks out the window of a plane.
It's played by
John Lithgow in the movie.
And for people who complained about him being cast as a Trinity killer in Dexter, clearly don't remember this.
Mm-hmm. And he sees a gremlin on the wing of the plane, and he keeps trying to tell people about it.
And they think he's
crazy because they always look and it's gone. And he sees it start to basically try to tear up the plane. And
I do think the one stewardess who was very friendly to him
mm-hmm.
somewhat believed him, because she always had this. He was like,
yeah, or at the very least, she was sympathetic to the fact that he was not in his right mind.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you that.
But it was directed by George Miller, who did the Mad Max movies, and it has that energy to it, and the way they film his claustrophobia is haunting, and Lithgow is so perfectly just manic and intense, and
the man doesn't have a calm moment at all throughout this whole thing.
We open with him in the bathroom having a panic attack,
and it just gets worse.
Mm-hmm. But what's funny is on the show Third Rock from the Sun, that John Lithgow starred in, they did a reference to this.
Really?
He says, he's like in the airport, says something about that to this guy, and the guy turns around and it's William Shatner. He says, "The same thing happened to me." But no, it's great. And one thing that's great is because Rod Serling had passed on by the time they made this, they had Burgess Meredith, who again starred in multiple classic episodes, they had him do the Rod Serling narration, sort of introducing each episode. And then at the very end, before the end credits, when they sort of do the title again at the very end, they used the recording of Rod Serling doing the intro.
What I liked about the fourth one, when we get the up close look of the gremlin,
and which looks a lot better in this version. It almost did in the original, but obviously
we get like an extreme close up on its eyes and an extreme close up on John Lithgow's eyes.
Yeah,
and you kind of mentioned how it almost seemed like they were bulging out of his face.
If you pause it, like at the exact moment, there is a split second where his eyes bug out.
And Lithgow goes so damn crazy. He breaks the window open and starts shooting at it. And everyone thinks he's just crazy.
He figures out who the air marshal is, takes their gun, and starts shooting at it like busts the window of the plane open and starts shooting.
And I'm thinking, this isn't going to end well. And the monster, of course, grabs him by the face. And I'm thinking this monster's just going to pull him out and just send him flying. And the monster just... Not today!
And then just jumps off and sort of just goes flying off into the ether. And it ends with Lithgow on a stretcher in a straitjacket being saying, "I saved them. I'm a hero." And then the mechanics actually seeing the plane and seeing that the wing has been all torn up. And then they circle back around to something that was in the prologue with Dan Aykroyd. They circle back around to that before then playing the classic theme song and the Serling narration. But no, I love this movie. I think...
it was really good.
And then one that I think is... well, actually, let's go ahead and next talk about Creepshow.
Before we get to Creepshow, because I feel that should be the final movie we talk about.
Okay.
In this
Then if we're gonna wait for that, then let's talk about a couple others.
I think one of the more classic modern ones that everyone seems to gravitate to is Trick or Treat.
Trick or Treat. Michael Dougherty's Trick or Treat.
We get multiple stories that happen on the same night that are loosely connected to each other.
This one they do Pulp Fiction style, where it's like they're all sort of happening congruently, and so we sort of cut each one. We're seeing the overlap with each one, as opposed to them being sort of,
because you do kind of get the horror comedy, the body horror with werewolves.
Yeah. You get some
supernatural,
some classic Just Desserts.
Yeah, it's
and then a slasher sort of. It's kind of like both slasher and haunted house.
It really is.
The last one.
It's done really well.
And the cast is because it's Dylan Baker, who, if you don't know him, he is just one of those character actors that is in everything, and he is always fucking amazing.
Brian Cox
is in it. Anna Paquin. Leslie Bibb has a cameo at the beginning. The fat kid from Bad Santa is in it.
It's so good. And I love Dylan Baker's bit. If I'm remembering him correctly, he's the
principal.
Killer.
Yeah,
that's right.
Principal.
I love when he is burying the body.
He's trying to bury the body of a kid he killed, and his son, he's like a single dad.
Don't forget about the
Yeah, and then this comes back. It's like, don't forget to help me carve the eyes. Like, because he's like, Dad, when can we carve the pumpkin? Billy, not now. Go inside and watch Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown's an asshole.
And the dad is whispering so low, and this kid is just yelling at the top of his lungs. And right when the dad thinks he's got him put away, and don't forget to help me with the eyes. I was dying.
It's that is definitely the most that one is definitely the most Creepshow of them.
And it makes me think that it makes you think he's gonna go kill his own son because he's getting
there is a fake out where you think he kills his son.
That's right.
And then you realize, oh, he's kind of training this. He's almost training his son to be a new serial killer.
That's right, because the pumpkin is the
backs out the pumpkin.
Head.
It's the fat kid's head, and the son says, "Don't forget to help me with the eyes." It's like,
right, and that's when he finally fucking whispers.
To be fair, though, they do establish that this kid is the fucking worst. The kid, because the kid he's like knocking jack-o'-lanterns over.
Yeah, that's right.
Eating like candy. You get the impression he took from other kids.
Because I think he knocked over his pumpkin and he caught him and he called him over.
Yeah, because he's just going by just knocking pumpkins over.
And he gave him candy and he tells him, it's one of the rules for Halloween. Always check candy, and he just
and the kid just starts vomiting
everywhere.
And it keeps after a while you think he's done, and then he keeps getting like that's also very much a just very fucked up joke that they do.
Even Dylan Baker's character, as he keeps going, is just okay.
Yeah, that's the part that gets me is when he's getting tired of it. It just gets me.
It was honestly one of my this movie kind of helped me break away from horror isn't just about slashers, because I was just so slasher crazed for a very long time.
As this one kind of covers all the bases,
and for me it was just horror can be funny. Okay, I'm digging it, and it was so good. And Dylan Baker does kind of get what's coming to him when he stalks him.
In another
when he's stalking
Anna Paquin. In another segment, he kind of gets his just desserts.
She seems to be the virgin, and she's a werewolf, and she's about to feed on her first human, and it's him.
And of course, she's in a Little Red Riding Hood costume. Yep.
My, what big eyes you have.
Yeah, and there's this great line earlier on when you have the girls the girls who you realize are werewolves later. One of them says something about, I ate some bad Mexican and had like diarrhea or something. And I'm just like, you watch that back and you're like,
I get it.
See what you did there. But then we get one that is about, that I really like because it's about an autistic girl. Who these kids sort of trick into thinking they're
going to be her friend.
Yeah.
And there's one who's being genuine with her.
He kind of feels bad.
He doesn't want to go along with it, but at the end he does, and he pays for it, just like the rest of the kids do. He kind of
feels bad, a little bit bad about it. You think maybe when he's the last one, you think maybe she's going to be she's going to forgive him, and she's just like, no. And I'm just like, good for you, Rhonda, good for you. But because
they tell this story of a bus driver who crashes his bus and all the kids died,
and it's
the ghost of all the kids
or the zombies
zombies of all the kids.
And you realize that, and it was driving this bus of kids who were psychopaths, or these kids who were dangerous psychopaths, and you realize the parents had paid him to drive them off a cliff and jump out.
See, I forgot about that. It's been a while since I've seen it.
Because the kids were all chained.
Oh, that's right.
They had to be prisoners.
Because they all drowned. They all drowned and they couldn't get out.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
And then for our final segment, we have Brian Cox as this grouchy old fucker who
almost like the Grinch who hates Halloween.
He really is, and he specifically
before we get to him, going back to the beginning, we have this horny couple, and it's you can't break any of the Halloween rules or this monster's gonna get you. And one of the ladies blows out a Halloween candle, and her lover finds her later with
she blows up the candle on the jack-o'-lantern before Halloween is over or something like that.
Yes, and her lover finds her with lollipop jagged in her mouth and is freaked out.
Yeah, her head, it's like her severed head with a pumpkin-shaped lollipop jammed in her mouth, like stretching out her mouth. And that's Leslie Bibb's character.
This monster comes after Brian Cox because the monster shows up to his door asking for candy, and he refuses.
It's basically in the form of this little kid with like a like burlap, like scarecrow-looking mask on, and it's just this cute little kid who with a little pumpkin-shaped lollipop, and they actually Brian Cox's look was actually patterned after John Carpenter.
That makes sense now that I think about it.
The mustache and hair was meant to look like John Carpenter. But yeah, this guy is basically tormenting.
It's almost like action horror here because these two just go to fucking war.
It is. It's a little bit Don't Breathe.
What I really like about Trick or Treat is just all of the homages that they shout out.
Oh yeah.
Because even in that final fight between Sam and Mr. Krieg, Mr. Krieg is he shoots it in the face.
Yeah.
Then
and
twice in the chest, and it blows off its hand.
Yeah.
And the hand later stabs him, and he falls down, and he just kind of
which is an Evil Dead 2 reference.
Yes.
My favorite horror movie.
And then he kind of brings his head up, and the hand starts crawling back, and he just goes, "Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me." Which is a thing reference.
Which is my second favorite horror movie.
Which was directed by John Carpenter, which is his character is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
It's so...
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
And I haven't seen it, the whole thing through in such a long time, but I really need to go back and watch it again because just thinking of that last segment is just a powerful indicator of why it is such a like a modern cult classic.
Oh yeah, and the VHS series. Have you seen any of those?
I've seen the first one.
I like them.
The weird vampire face rip
siren.
Open.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, VHS 1 and 2, and then VHS 94, all worth checking out. I think 94 is actually the best one. That one came out last year, and I think was it a Shudder exclusive or something like that? But it'll also be on disc. But yeah, I do recommend those. Again, this is just a format that I feel like usually works, and I just like. There's a Shudder original called The Mortuary Collection that I highly recommend.
Okay. I still need to get Shudder.
Yeah, it's awesome. And there's one that I think is absolutely a classic, is a quintessential 90s horror film, and that is Tales from the Hood. Now, this movie you've seen parts of.
Yes, I've seen parts of it, but I haven't seen it all the way through.
Right. It is genuinely great, and it is basically the 4 stories in it are about black issues, because it's made by black filmmakers, and everything from police brutality to gang violence to this sort of cycle of domestic abuse that is unfortunately common, where it's like basically kids are, young boys are told, don't cry, never, don't show emotion, and then that builds up, and that repression leads to anger being taken out, and just this, very vicious cycle. You've got a racist politician.
Oh, lovely.
That is a parody of that segment opens with a direct parody of a political campaign ad for a politician named Jesse Helms. They're directly parodying an iconic campaign ad of his at the very beginning. It's that one is great. That one might be the best one. And then there's one that's about gang violence at the very end. And this is another one that has a great, again, very much like a Creepshow or not Creepshow, but like a Tales from the Crypt or something like that. The end of the wraparound has a fun twist. And while these weren't done by different directors, they had different effects crews. I think for different stories.
Okay.
So like you had different like special effects people. But it's but that one is a classic. It's a lot of fun. There's definitely some humor in there. It's not a full-on horror comedy, the way something like XX or Creepshow is, but it's I guess XX isn't really a horror comedy. It's got the one that's funny, but yeah, the way something like Creepshow would be, it's not a full-on horror comedy, but I do it's highly recommended. They made 2 sequels to it that are both fine. They're fine. But I love that one. But again, one of my like top 5 honestly favorite horror movies is Creepshow, which did have 2 sequels, one of which actually had some of the original people involved in it and was okay. Creepshow 2 is okay. And then, like I said, Creepshow 3, none of the original people were involved, and it's fucking awful.
We'll just pretend that one doesn't exist.
Yeah, for real. But what I love about Creepshow, first of all, it's directed by George Romero, who, of course, did Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and it's written by Stephen King. One of the stories, the story The Crate, was an existing Stephen King short story that he adapted for the movie. But this movie, what I love about it is, again, it is very much a horror comedy, like in equal measure. It's very campy and tongue-in-cheek. It really set the tone for what the Tales from the Crypt TV show would become.
Okay.
It's got it's got a great cast with people from Adrienne Barbeau to Leslie Nielsen, Hal Holbrook, E.G. Marshall, a young Ed Harris, who was still fairly unknown at the time, Ted Danson. Great.
Hey, Ed Harris really crushes it, doesn't he?
He does. That's really funny once you see the movie. And Stephen King stars
in some killer dance moves.
He does. Stephen King stars in a segment.
Probably the weakest one.
It's definitely the weakest one because it's mostly just pure silliness, but at the same time, like, you kind of can't help but really, like, you can't help but enjoy it because it's Stephen King just being silly.
Yeah, he touches a meteor and starts turning into grass.
Yeah.
Literally.
Like, he starts turning, like, plants start,
plants start growing all over his property and all over himself.
After he gets, as he puts it, meteor shit on his hand. Meteor shit! It's just...
He's, at the end, he's just this literal plant person. He's just shotgunning the mouth and blows his head off. All you just see is a hole go through a plant.
And you see, like, plant goo or something.
Plant goo.
Yeah.
Meteor shit.
Meteor shit. Yeah, he just plays this farmer out in the sticks who a meteor lands on his property, and he's Jordy Verrill is his name.
Oh, Lord.
It's funny. It's definitely the weakest, but it is a funny one. That one's pretty much just pure comedy.
I know I struggled on this one.
Other than the ending being kind of tragic, but like.
I struggled with this one on which one I like the most.
Yeah.
Because the tide.
Something to tide you over.
Is so
That's my
good.
favorite. That's my favorite.
Like, damn.
The Crate, and they creep up on you. They creep up on you really got to you, because you got to think about roaches. And that one is all about roaches.
Man, I hated that. I mean, the guy definitely deserved it.
Yeah. But
I heard your husband went out with a bang.
Yeah. This guy who's like laughing about this business executive he was feuding with. The guy commits suicide because he knew he was ruined. And the guy who's like the main character is like, Well, great. That saves me a lot of trouble.
Like, you're not supposed to call with good news.
Right.
I was just, what the hell?
Yeah, this guy's a monster.
And the guy's wife calls him, and he's just, how are you?
How are you?
And he basically gets killed by cockroaches. They literally get inside.
Yeah,
his skin.
at the end, basically at the end, like you just see his body lying there, and cockroaches start just like bursting from his body and out his mouth. Like it's pretty gross, but it's very effective because you fucking hate the guy.
1 or 2 bugs, I'm fine. You give me a swarm of bugs, yes, I got a bit of a problem.
Yeah. But I love this movie. It combines genuine scares with, tongue-in-cheek, just kind of campy humor. And then the style I love so much. And that was one of the things that I felt like Creepshow 2 was missing, was all the very comic book looking visuals.
Well, I liked how in Tide, is that I know we kind of talked about just Leslie Nielsen's just so driven for vengeance because his wife cheated on him. Yeah, and he buries both of them.
Both his wife and then Ted Danson, who his wife was sleeping with.
He buries both of them, up till their heads in sand, and basically the tide comes in, and if they can hold their breath long enough, they'll get free. Yeah. But obviously the body panics and they both die. And then has zombies, they come back and they put him in the same situation. Yeah. And it ends with, him screaming, I can hold my breath for a very long time, but we're fairly certain we know his fate. Right. And the crate.
Hal Holbrook in this segment is so brilliant.
If I had a wife like that, I'd want to kill her.
But yeah, Adrienne Barbeau plays his obnoxious bitchy wife, who's just the absolute worst, and she's constantly nagging and.
What would you do without me?
Yeah, and he just kind of has. No. He just kind of has this. It's just like you can tell
fantasy of killing her.
He just keeps fantasizing about killing her, and
he comes across this monster in a crate and feeds her to it.
And the monster, the filmmakers called Fluffy,
of course.
But it was this weird, like sort of gorilla, like Bigfoot.
That's what kind of reminded me of a mix of
it was
some sort
honestly,
of Sasquatch.
It looks like the abominable snowman in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and like the stop motion Rudolph. It kind of looks like that.
If it wasn't,
but not quite as like big, not quite as like big around, but
and if it wasn't in the North Pole,
right?
But Creepshow, again, after seeing it for the first time, it's just very, very different elements of horror. And
they all work.
They do all work in their own way. Because even with the cockroach, it's yes, the guy deserves it, but you're still grossed out because bugs. Right. Tide. I remember saying it as we were watching it. What they say about revenge is best to dig 2 graves. And for me, what sold me on he's gonna get his comeuppance as well was when the lover looks dead into the camera and is saying, I'm going to get you. Yeah. And he
swears vengeance upon him.
Yes. And for me it was just, he's screwed.
We've established the unfinished business.
Yes, but the whole, even before that, just the whole build up and just how unhinged Nielsen was. Just, damn.
Yeah, because this is like sort of in that turning point where he had just, like, people had just discovered how great of a comic actor he was, but he was still doing some dramatic work before he just completely switched over to doing comedy. And this is clearly him playing it like a drama, even though it is a horror comedy, but the comedy isn't in his, he's not, it's not what we think of as a Leslie Nielsen character. He's not playing Frank Drebin.
And I love how he's just, go ahead, scream, no one's going to hear you. I own all of this.
Yeah.
Just, if you're going to sleep with a married woman, don't let it be a rich guy. If you're going to break that ground.
Right. Rich guys are supposed to be the ones with mistresses. Come on. Don't you know the rules here?
Is there anything else you'd like to add on to Horror Anthology, Will? I'm glad you introduced me to this because I mostly knew it has TV show format with a couple of movies. Right. But seeing it in movie format, it's just...
You just realize how potent of a format that can be when done well.
When you don't have the pressure of having to tell a long story.
Yeah, you don't have to stretch out. Yeah.
Horror in short stories work. And I think all these movies that we've talked about, at least even the ones that aren't very impressive, always have at least one that's going to stand out and show that it can still get the scares in.
Yeah. The worst one, though, I don't know if they'll ever make one worse than Veronica. Have you seen Veronica?
No.
Okay, I was saying.
I've heard you and our friend Taylor talk about it so much.
It is one of the worst. It is one of the worst movies we've ever seen in our lives. It is so bad. Jesus Christ, it's bad. I mean, it's like it's as bad as The Room. The Room just happens to be funny.
I almost want to watch it, but if it's as bad as...
But it's not a funny bad. That's the part that's the most...
If it's as bad as you and Taylor say, then I think I'm just going to have to take your word for it and sit that one out.
It's one that it's like, man, it's unfortunate that none of this is unintentionally funny because it is so bad. It is like among the worst movies ever made, but it's not funny bad. It's not, again, something like The Room or Troll 2 or something like that where it's like, there's nothing for me to laugh at. It's just, I'm just kind of miserable.
As are we all.
Right. With all that said, I'm Will Lastly.
I'm Alex Maynard.
And until next time, be right back!